Hello, and a very warm welcome to those of you who are joining us live in our Zoom room, live on YouTube, and those of you who are watching a recording later on. We welcome you to ELSA Connect. And please do share our YouTube link. It's called ELSA Bangalore. And you're welcome to share our sessions with your colleagues, your friends, your family at any time. ELSA, for those of you who may not know, is the Lady Shri Ram College alumni. And ELSA Connect is brought to you from Bangalore, the Bangalore chapter of ELSA. And you know, when March 2020, when COVID came upon us, there was a paradigm shift in the way we communicate with one another. That's when ELSA Connect was born, and we are well over, I think, 130 to 40 sessions now. This is a space where ELSAs, the resources ELSAs, share their lives, share their skills, and it's a very informal space and very meaningful space. And we do hope you enjoy the sessions we've been bringing to you and will continue to bring to you. Without much ado, I would like to say that, you know, there's been a wide array of sessions that I've had so far. And right from lawyers to filmmakers to wellness healers sessions to authors, you know, it's a very wide spectrum, to mountaineers, to homemakers. ELSAs are in all fields and spaces. So that's what the spaces we've been bringing to you. Today, we have a very special session. It's a panel, actually, and an HR panel, a very experienced panel. We have Dimple Agarwal joining us from London. Thank you, Dimple. Dimple is the Deputy CEO of People, and I have asked her 2-3 times actually now by the time I'm done with it, is the Deputy CEO of Deloitte in Europe, and based out of London, and People and Purpose, as she puts it. And then we have Priyanka Sudarshan, who is the Vice President Human Resource of Capgemini India, based here in Bangalore. And we have Jaya Jyoti, who's HR business partner at Flipkart, also based out of Bangalore. So without much further ado, before I hand over to Jaya, I would like to thank the ELSA Connect team, without whom we would not be here. So thank you so much, Yumna, Neelu, Sandhya, Nalini, Tanya, Preeti, Ruchi, and Kaveri for holding this together and week on week bringing it to us. Over to you, Jaya, all yours.
Thank you, Vandana. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the session today, both on Zoom as well as those of you who are watching us on YouTube. While the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted all individuals across, it is believed that it has had a disproportionate adverse impact on women. So and we are at a crossroads right now at different workplaces, and now more than ever, we need to rethink our usual workplace norms, else we risk unwinding years of painstaking progress. Those of you who are in the HR field or otherwise, years of painstaking progress we've tried to make towards gender diversity and inclusion. So what we are going to do today is start a freewheeling discussion anchored through questions we thought were relevant to raise and address. Thank you, Dimple and Priyanka, for being here today. We will open the session for dialogue in the later half. We also have a very diverse group present here today on the call. We will look forward to hearing from you. Since we have a very, very tightly planned session ahead, I'll just go on to the first question. So the first question is to both Dimple and Priyanka. And the question is that, do you believe that the post-COVID world of work poses disproportionate challenges for women? If yes, what are the top 2-3 challenges according to you in your experience?
So, all right. Thank you so much, Jaya. Absolute pleasure to be here. So if I may just respond to that, I think, the top 2 or 3 challenges that I see is, One, we did look at this whole remote work situation that came with COVID as a blessing, initially, that women would be able to really pull it off, that whole work-life balance would finally find its way into the lives of women. But I think, it's pretty much the contrary that happened. The whole responsibility of being a full-time mother, aggravated by sort of, your children attending school from home, and then, you're at the same time juggling, your work calls, etc. So I think the whole juggle and those challenges kind of intensified over a period of time. Had it kind of stopped with a couple of months, maybe it would have been a good change for everyone. But as it stretched, we could see the stress levels for women really going high. Even in the tech industry, where we feel that women are fairly in control of their time, compared to a few other professions. And the second thing I would say is that, increasingly, we felt that women who relied on networking at the workplace, which is, again, you do it within those hours, right? You don't kind of stay back after work to network. You have those hours, you use those to form connections, bonds, etc. I think that sort of somewhere got impacted. So, women joining us in middle management, senior management, one could see them struggle, like visibly struggle to get those connections and get work going off the ground. So I could, clearly see those two manifestations at, from the IT perspective.
And thanks, Priyanka. If I can add to that, first of all, thank you all for inviting me to this. It's probably the most exciting thing I've done this week. I'm really, really glad to be here. But to just supplement and totally agree with what you've just said, Priyanka, I thought, being a true consultant, I'll just quote a few stats and data points, because we actually conducted a survey in October with working women across the world. And actually the findings from that are really concerning. Like you said, Priyanka, it's upending people's work-life balance. It is affecting their physical and mental well-being in a strong way. Some women are really questioning their long and short-term career prospects. And they are definitely spending longer hours at work whilst juggling all these caregiving responsibilities in their full-time jobs. So just a couple of stats, which I think were quite stark from my perspective. 82% said that their lives had been majorly negatively disrupted. 70% of these said that they are really concerned about their career progression post-COVID. And actually, 10% of these women, working women, said they are absolutely ready to leave the workforce altogether. And that's really concerning, because if organizations don't step up now, we are going to go 10 steps backwards in achieving gender parity, which the whole world has been working really hard at progressing. Just a couple of, I guess, challenges people are facing in their daily lives. 65% said that they now have more responsibilities for household chores. 1/3 of them said their workload had definitely increased. 58% of those with children reported that they had added childcare responsibilities. And 53% of those with children said they now had to work with their kids from a homeschooling perspective. I don't know about all countries. In the UK, definitely schools were closed for a period of time. Then the government opened the schools, then the cases went up again. So the schools are right now closed again. So it's having a huge impact on them. And just before I pause, I just wanted to mention one more finding from that survey or research, which I thought was very interesting since I don't have children. It said that there were quite significant differences between women with childcare responsibilities or caregiving responsibilities and those without. And those were that the ones without child care or caregiving responsibilities felt a much higher negative impact on their mental well-being. And 49% of those without caregiving responsibilities felt it had an impact on their physical well-being as well. And the biggest stressor was how overwhelmed those with no caregiving responsibilities felt. 58% of them felt more overwhelmed compared to the ones with childcare responsibilities, which is quite interesting, right? Because a lot of our organizations have been very focused on people with children and people with caregiving responsibilities. And that's because people who don't have caregiving responsibilities feel the pressure to be always on, to be always available, to pick up the work of their team members who have caregiving responsibilities. So I'll just pause over there, but I just wanted to compliment what Priyanka said with stats, which was, I thought, quite, it sounds a bit grim, but I think there's an opportunity because we are at an inflection point, and as organizations, we can do something about it.
Thanks, Priyanka and Dimple, for that. I think, Dimple, some of the points that you made give us a good segue into our next question, which I think is very, very relevant from an individual, but also from an org point of view. So, Dimple, this is for you. How do you think organizations need to change from a policy, practice, and culture point of view to help women employees mitigate these gender challenges?
Definitely. And again, it came out of the research as well, but I think it'll stand true for everybody because we see it every day. The first point again resonates with what you said, Priyanka, which is we have to make flexible working the norm. Right? It can't be an option where a woman has to ask for flexible working because she has these other responsibilities. And it should be available to men as well. I find that, again, when we put policies in place, at least my belief is you've got to make flexible working in this example for all. Just like we have maternity leave, we have to have good paternity leave so that men can play a bigger role in childcare in this example, just so that women can balance, if you like, work with other things that they do. And when I talk about flexible working, it could be, it's not just about working from home, which, like you said, Priyanka, we all thought this will give a big boost, right? Because now people can work, women can work when they want, how they want. But it includes things like reduced work hours, job sharing, working longer but fewer days, whatever form of flexibility. But the most important thing is you can change the policy if you don't change the culture with it, where it becomes acceptable. It's not going to help, I think. The second thing I'd say is more from a leadership and culture perspective, which is you've got to lead with empathy and trust. Because your people are working remotely, you've got to trust them for the deliverables or the outputs they're supposed to produce. And by empathy, I mean having very open and supportive conversations and having very regular, deliberate check-ins. That's something we definitely have tried over the last year, to making it mandatory to check in with your teams and genuinely being interested in, are they okay? Asking them if they are okay. The third, I would say, is promoting networking, sponsorship, mentoring, etc., as a way to grow and learn. It has become harder, like you say, Priyanka, because, it's like you're on Zoom for 10, 12 hours a day. It's quite hard when you're on Zoom drinks all the time. But we do need to work out how to accommodate different people's schedules and needs. I think creating learning opportunities through digital bite-sized ways of learning so people can consume learning when they want, because again, in our survey, a lot of women said that they really want to continue to focus on their career. They want to progress, they want to learn, but actually the old ways of learning and classroom, etc., is just not absolutely going to work. Just very quickly, I just want to make a mention of it, though, even though it's obvious, is reward, promotion, successions. I know for years we are all trying to remove bias from those processes. It's even more important now with remote working because you actually can't interact in the same way with working women. So how do you really revisit those processes to ensure that there is no bias? And I think lastly, again, a very obvious one for this audience, how do you make diversity, equity, and inclusion a complete non-negotiable? It should be non-negotiable. People need to be held to account. Because I think a lot of organizations pay lip service to those things, but I think this is a time to really, really step up. So I'll pause there, Jaya, because I'm sure there'll be questions.
Thanks for that, Dimple. Very valid points again. I think all organizations right now are trying to figure out how to actually make this work and go beyond just saying it in terms of word. And what you said was most important, right? That what we really need to do is change the culture and make it acceptable across instead of trying to solve for women specifically, because that often ends up being counterintuitive and leads to further discrimination, actually.
I always say, don't fix the women, fix the organization, right?
That's right. So, Priyanka, the next question is for you. So, while there have been a lot of discussions happening on how women in the workplace have been affected, I think we also need to look at how the definition of workplace itself needs to be expanded and look at more different categories of women, right? Not just women who are in organizations and in white collar jobs. So, there have been a lot of discussions on how the convergence of poverty, gender, and marginalization has played out during the pandemic to render specific categories of women especially vulnerable. What do you think are the reasons for this, and how could we solve for it at an individual as well as a societal level?
Thank you. Jaya, I think it's very true that the pandemic has had a bit of a multiplier effect, on marginalized women. So, if you actually look at statistics, right, there are even a state like Karnataka in India where we consider ourselves to be the Silicon Valley of India, but guess what? Not even 30% women are digitally included, right? And we are talking about Karnataka. So when you actually go to other states of India, it is even lower. And that is it's going to really have a multiplier effect when it comes to setting them back, in time. If you don't have digital access today, you're clearly disadvantaged in multiple ways. And the source for worry for these women and girls is that if they're digitally excluded, they're going to be excluded from the very important learning process that we just discussed, right? Dimple said that learning is going digital today because, classroom learning, classroom training, etc., is quite out of the question. So, you can see that for a whole year, there are girl students, for example, who haven't got access to digital learning. They're excluded from the learning process. And in any case, we are fighting, a systemic programming where girl children tend to drop out of education in their early years. So just look at how this will exacerbate, right, that whole situation. So in Capgemini, we are looking at those segments of, school-going children, girls who are in, college, etc., and trying to see how we can equip them and digitally include them into the whole ecosystem, so that they do not get further marginalized and pushed back, into society. If you really look at different initiatives that corporates can take, we've recently had one of our very successful initiatives where we've gone to tier 3 towns, and remotely digitally recruited women who we thought could even do entry-level jobs, so that there is a livelihood situation coming in even in these times, right? So entry-level jobs, it could be data entry operators, could be on the IT infrastructure side where, they could work on entry-level remote support jobs, etc. We've included them, there is a Sakhi program that was launched recently where we've hired these women and tried to make sure that the pandemic does not come in the way of their finding, employment, right? So I think more and more companies can do that. You mentioned, white collar workers. Well, even for white collar workers, I think a major hurdle to in the current situation is the fact that we are faced with multiple situations at the workplace, which are to do with things like stress-related domestic violence, for example, right? And therefore, this whole sudden absenteeism from work, right, of our of the more junior women colleagues who we have at work. There is, domestic violence has suddenly come into the forefront of the discussion for many corporates. This is something that we were not really talking about very openly in companies, but now we are having to do that because, guess what? Your workplace is redefined. It is the home. And what happens in the home is directly affecting your employee. The number of domestic violence cases that have started to now come in and which have resulted in a formal domestic violence policy in our organization, which is very recently launched, is to do with the increasing incidence of this, and like Dimple said, it's gender agnostic. It's not just for women. We've extended it to men and women, but as you would realize, more of the complainants are women. All right. So having a policy which says that for about 2 weeks you can take a leave of absence, paid leave of absence, we will transfer you if there is, this whole looming fear of physical harm or something. We will transfer you to a different location temporarily, so you can work out of a different office. Extending our creche facilities for the children of such impacted employees, right? So these are things that we've suddenly had to think of. it was never really in the whole ambit of, what corporates were discussing. We were talking about how inclusion is important. We can't stop at diversity. We must recruit women at all levels, but, we can't have them attriting because we don't have an inclusive work environment. That tends to happen. Dimple mentioned the importance of inclusion. I think we were all in that dialogue that, how can we just go beyond recruiting women, make them actually succeed in organizations? But now this is a very different paradigm that's coming, right? Their whole, the physical, mental well-being, I think is going to take center stage going forward for corporates, be it for their own employees or society at large. What can you do to really facilitate mental well-being? Which so far, I think we did talk about it. We did consider it as one of the aspects of health and wellness when it comes to organizations, but it hadn't taken center stage in such a big way. So I find that shift, really important. And I think it is also very sort of contextual for the society at large, because, you need to offer those, you need to bring this out in the open. We've kind of put out posters all over saying that if you feel you are under mental stress, if you feel there is a, there is this whole issue of domestic violence, please speak up. We would earlier say this only for prevention of sexual harassment, because they were coming to work and they were going to be, there were chances of them complaining against someone at work here. But now that whole situation has shifted to their homes. So, I think it's a delicate balance, but we'll have to find that right balance and make sure that, we are enabling women to speak up, and we are providing some sort of a framework to help them and not let them give up, because it can be really overwhelming. Dimple also touched upon that point. It is just overwhelming. You're 24/7 in a restricted, in restricted confines. You have to kind of, get on with your daily life, but at the same time, you've got, work responsibilities as well as caregiving responsibilities. I think over a stretched period of time, they seem to be taking, this seems to be taking a toll. I've seen good practices where empathetic leaders have said that you cannot do work calls after this hour. It is not, you cannot, forget men and women, you should not have a work day that stretches beyond 10 hours or 9 hours, because you just can't, mentally function at that level for days at end, right? So we've had compulsory lunch breaks, tea breaks, where no one will make calls to you. No meetings will be scheduled. I think the empathetic side of leaders has really come into play, and I think that whole difference of leadership is very fascinating to see. There are some people who've become micromanagers. They want to know, what is the time people take breaks? How long are they on their laptops? What are they doing? And then there is that empathetic leader that says, I understand what you're going through, right? And I'm going to really create a framework for you to succeed.
Thanks, Priyanka. Again, I think you've made some very interesting points. I was reading a recent article which actually said that while events like economic recession impact men and women almost equally, but some of these events like, say, demonetization that happened in India or a global pandemic actually ends up impacting women more, because women tend to be more employed in industries like retail, agriculture, hospitality, and manufacturing, as well as a lot of caregiving roles, which ends up having a greater impact. So in India, I was reading that the labor force participation rate for women has drastically dropped, and it will take us years to recover, even if we come up with a vaccine and at some point we restore the economy to a new normal. Also, the point you were making about increased cases of domestic violence. Now, while there is a law, usually organizations have stayed away from affirmative action in these things, but more and more organizations, mentioned Capgemini, I think Unilever also has already come up with a policy, which is very, very important. The other thing which also you spoke about, how traditionally how we define posh cases has changed, but I see more and more organizations also now defining that in a virtual remote working scenario, what could harassment now mean? So, and how do leaders and managers need to be sensitized for that? So I think these are, considering right now we have a policy gap, therefore organizations, this is an opportunity in which organizations need to step up and solve for this policy gap. If we have to continue the little progress that we'd made after a lot of effort in the years before the pandemic. So thanks for sharing your perspective, Priyanka. The next question is for both Dimple and Priyanka. So could you share a personal challenge you dealt with in this new world of work, and how did you handle it? And second, for all of us who are on the call today as well as watching this session on YouTube, what are some solutions that you would recommend for women that can help all of us navigate and adapt to this new normal?
Shall I go, Priyanka?
Please, yes.
I did think about that, Jaya. I guess it's important to just describe. So I live alone, right? Which, of course, and I'm in my little apartment at this dining table every day since March of last year. I think I've been to the office 3 times. I have a responsibility towards 55,000 people across the 27 countries that I'm responsible for, and 20,000 in the UK. So between my responsibilities in my role and myself, it has been very challenging personally to keep my resilience up. I also physically have low immunity levels, and I don't cook. So I was like, first 3 months, I had to kind of literally think about where am I even going to get food from, if you like. I know it sounds basic, but it was important for me. So I think the few things I did was, one is I have made sure I exercise regularly. My trainer is 73 years old. He's absolutely fabulous. He has cancer. So we do it online because we can't be outside in the park, if you like, so he's not exposed. Despite all the risks that come with it, I have traveled 5 times during COVID, because without it, I don't think I would have survived, including being at home for Diwali in India in November. I have tried to meditate a lot. I'm quite a restless person, so it's hard, but I try at least twice or thrice a week to use my Calm app for 10 minutes to just get that in. From a work perspective, I would say I have increasingly started going off video. I felt like, one, it was far too much pressure to be on screen all the time for 12, 15 hours a day. So especially 8-hour meetings, etc. I just come on video when I have to speak. Otherwise, I'm off video. The second thing is, being a very introverted person, the silver lining for me through COVID has been that the socialization, the work socialization has gone down almost completely, right? You have Zoom drinks once in a while, which is okay. I can't tell you how delighted I am that I don't have to do dinners thrice a week with work people. I love them, but honestly, I did not like that. So I've become quite selective about who I talk to, which is non-work related. I am, like I said, do go off video because I'd rather spend my 3 hours at night on Netflix rather than 15 hours, and my eyesight has absolutely dropped, if you like. So it's a combination of mental well-being, physical well-being, and managing, if you like, the responsibilities that we have in our roles. So when I thought about it, I thought I'll just keep it as simple as that, than the very complex works challenges, which I'm sure, Priyanka, you've experienced as well.
All right. No, I can completely understand that, Dimple, right? So I think somewhere people just connect, sort of associate HR people with being very social, for some reason. But, I think I would again fall into your category, where I'm not into, generally socializing for the sake of socializing. I mean, I really like interacting with employees, and I do it, through with my colleagues through one-to-one meetings or, small group meetings. But yeah, this general lunch, dinner, and large town halls is not my cup of tea, right? And that was definitely during the past year, we've kind of steered clear of that, which is, I think, great. But it's I think on the personal side, I have a 14-year-old at home, my 14-year-old daughter, and then my husband was also working from home. So you can imagine 3 people logged into 3 calls, and the doorbell rings and everybody's kind of expecting the other one to get the door, and so you have cooking. Then again, cooking is not one of my strong points. But then, how spoiled we are in India, right, Dimple, with so much of house help available. I mean, and we are blessed, actually blessed. But we had no house help coming in. So for me, it was the first time I had to juggle cooking and work and cleaning. And, with all my husband's efforts and, my daughter trying to do her little bit, we were sort of just, I was crashing at night, absolutely sleeping like a baby, because I was so dead tired by the end of it. And I really appreciate my house help so much more. I already did, but I now appreciate them doubly so. So, it was that. But I think it's interesting how we've evolved. So, for example, just to calm myself down, I had always observed yoga from a distance. But it's only now when I got the time, there was no commute to work, you save all of that time. But actually, it's kind of tried some yoga, and I thought it worked wonders for both my physical and mental sort of health. I felt much calmer after that and much more in control. So I think it was good. I would perhaps, if things had continued as they were, I would really have taken that time out to explore these areas that I hadn't really, done so far. So that was a blessing. But outside of that, it is wonderful to see how people at work have adapted to continue the social connects. You have your Microsoft Teams coffee, chat, and you can go into a chat room and there are people there. So if you feel like having a chat with someone, just log in, at from a certain time to a certain time, and you can have a chat with just about anyone. They will, they host some nice, small, interesting games. There are such innovative ideas to stay connected, with people. We had sessions where we had it was kind of book reading sessions, and where authors came and spoke about the books they had read and they were able to tap into an employee base, which otherwise, if these things were physical, they would have had 40 people in the room, but they were in these times they were able to reach out to 400 at one time, which was amazing. And you could see that interaction. So I think it had its positives, definitely had its positives. I can tell you people are eager to continue this way of working, but perhaps we'll go back to the 60-40 model, where you are either 60% at work or 40% remote, or the other way around, depending on the nature of your job. But I don't think we are going back to 100%, everybody going back to work, because we've seen that a lot of this is in the minds of people, right? You can make things happen. Clients can be happy while you're working remote, delivering remote. So I think that realization has come about. And at max, the 60-40 arrangements will happen in the new normal, whenever it is here.
Dimple and Priyanka. So I think, as we promised, we wanted to open the session for discussion. We have a couple of questions coming in. Those of you watching this on YouTube, you can also put in your comments and questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. So I'm just going to call on to people on the Zoom session first to ask their questions. And when you're asking your questions, it'll be great if you could switch on your video. It'll be nice to see and hear you. So the first, Vinita Sethi. Vinita, would you like to ask your question? And if it's addressed to Dimple or Priyanka specifically, just call that out, please.
Both the panelists. And hi, since I work in healthcare and we really got back to work really fast, but yet in my Zoom meetings, and I work with the World Economic Forum a lot, when you're in a board meeting, even if they don't look into your eyes and ask you, you take your chair and make a point made. You stand up and speak, okay? And you being HR professionals know how we women struggle even in board meetings. They try and make you fumble on the figures and then you have to be completely right up there. But what I have realized in Zoom meetings, and it's not like you said, I think, that it's not a misogynistic attitude, or it's just a structure, but it is difficult. And I was going through a WEF paper where even in US, 1 out of 5 women felt they couldn't speak. Now, if this is going to be our trend, even if you use blended technologies, I also sometimes find it very difficult to button when I'm outnumbered in a Zoom meeting by men, and especially when I'm in India and they're in other zones and I'm half asleep and I have to make a point and I have to push my project. I'm just like, okay, I'll send a mail. So that, I think, is somewhere HR needs to step up, even in organizations. That retraining is, how are you going to approach this, is my first question. And my second question is a very simple question on why is it that HR is still not taking a stand on getting health CXOs appointed in companies? What is holding them back? You've talked of yoga, balancing life, yourselves. Why is it that we're still not getting the CHROs, whatever you want to call it, Chief Health Research Officer or Health Conduct Officer?
I can respond
Right.
to the last.
Yeah.
Shall I respond to the last bit? Especially, I think it's a very important point you make, Vinita, because interestingly, my clients, and they are large organizations who I shan't name, actually, who are so good at most people related things or diversity and inclusion, they've all realized that they undermined, if you like, the importance of health in general, right from having records and databases to, how would they actually look after their people. So you can look at it as an opportunity, because I think organizations are now asking the question. We are actually helping some organizations think through that as to how do you make health of your people center stage, versus otherwise it was on the periphery and it was a nice to have, and you tick the box on certain benefits or facilities that you provide to your people. So I think it is happening. It'll be slow, unfortunately, but at least it's come to a lot of organizations' attention. And to your point on Zoom meetings, I feel exactly the same. So I think I'm sure everybody here feels exactly the same. What I have started doing, at least as a starter for 10, is I definitely use the chat better to make my point of view or to ask a question, because somebody or the other will read it and call it out most of the time. But I agree with you. I think people need to be retrained into the etiquettes, if you like, of remote meetings or Zoom meetings, because people haven't switched their brain actually how do you include people in a conversation where everybody is digital. I don't know, Priyanka, if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, I do. So very valid points, Dimple, and thank you for that question, Vinita. So, I think wellness is increasingly going to take center stage. We just, won't have an option, and it's not about ergonomics, getting the right office chair, etc. We are way beyond that now. It's to do with the how effective your employees can be from wherever they're working, right? And that brings a completely whole new perspective to health and wellness when it comes to corporates. And right now it's folding under the HR, ambit and responsibility. But I soon see that we will need someone who's specialized, because, we are not the experts on this. So clearly, I see this evolving. And your question is perhaps, it's going to become a reality, in the near future, where we will have someone who will be a chief wellness officer, if you like. Right, and this a chief well-being officer, so to speak, because it is a very specialized field, and we are talking about both mental as well as physical wellness here, and we are also extending it to families. A lot of our initiatives actually touch children, spouses, say aging parents who are staying with people. We try and increase the ambit. Even to the people who are living with the individual. So yeah, I think it is going to evolve for sure. And yeah, remind me of your other question, Vinita. The first one, the second one I know was to do with
What about the Zoom meetings? Women getting less space to speak up, and both of us agreed that it is difficult. Yeah.
So, inclusion, diversity and inclusion too, I think has to take on this digital aspect. How digitally inclusive are you? And that has to, and digital etiquettes about really passing that virtual mic to people and ensuring that everyone has a chance to speak. Just like Dimple said, I use the chat feature as well quite a bit. And I think there are, people do read it, and it kind of, makes a point. But all the same, there may be some specific orientation programs now required as to how to make inclusion and a reality in remote work, and in the digital space. Because, physically, when we were all together in office, it was a completely different set of dynamics. But now, people who are just that much more confident or vocal, and they're so much more comfortable with technology. They are the ones who are able to make their presence felt. This will need to evolve to include everyone in that space. I mean, I couldn't agree more. There is this concept of digital natives and digital migrants, right? So the generation that are digital migrants, I think you see that the whole ageism also come in into teams that are working together. The digital natives, who are mostly the millennials, they are so much more comfortable with technology. I don't want to make a generalization here because it might not be that way 100% of the time. But again, generational diversity also has a role to play here. And again, that was, on the periphery, but it's coming, really center stage now. As I can see that becoming clearly an agenda for us at the workplace. So I think interesting things, yes, interesting things to look forward to. Just a point to add here, I think the fact that we've gone digital, the positive of it is, you're actually looking at the gig economy where people are contributing small packets of work. These could be retired people, stay-at-home mothers, people who are moonlighting in jobs that they don't have as a day job, but they're interested or passionate about. I think that whole segment, perhaps it was far more evolved in the West, but I can see that evolving at a fast pace in India as well. Where people, there stops being this whole concept of retirement because you can contribute from anywhere. You don't really have to make that commute and go to a workplace. I think the gig economy, will come into its own. Specifically speaking from an India context, we do see it coming really, in terms of the next 18 to 24 months.
Thank you.
So we have a next question from Shonali. Hi, Shonali.
Hi, Jaya. Thanks. So this question is, anyone can take this. I think Priyanka spoke about empathy, right? How leaders had all put on their empathetic hats during the lockdown and when everyone moved to work from home. Where does one draw the line, especially when you're dealing with millennials? I'm a manager. I manage a team, and we all have our stories. But I just wanted to know your views.
Dimple, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to understand what you mean by when do you draw the line, because obviously, again, it's different for different individuals. But I can only talk from my experience because 70% of our workforce are millennials or Gen Z, if you like. And actually, empathy, if I'm answering your question right, takes a slightly different turn with them in my experience, because most of them are living in flat shares, or they are doing their work out of their bedrooms, etc. So actually responding to their issues from a well-being perspective and therefore being empathetic has been quite different, and that's why we've kept our offices open for those who absolutely need to use the offices. Just like if you were going through domestic violence, etc., you would want to keep your offices open so people have another space to work in. We've done that actually mostly for that generation of people, because they are in flat shares, they are sharing them with competitors, they are in their bedrooms eating, sleeping, working. So it's been more about support to them from a space perspective, but also from a loneliness perspective. So if a lot of them are not married or have a partner or have a family, actually our loneliness really ticked up in October, November last year. So we created, if you like, a buddy system where you actually address, just the whole point of loneliness and isolation that has come with this entire thing. So I'm not sure I've answered your question, but I saw the word millennials in the chat, and I was like thinking about, actually, it has been quite different for that group of people. The issues have been different, and therefore how we've addressed them has been different. But I don't know what you mean by draw the line, because I think...
How do you know that they're not taking too much advantage of the support that a company or a manager is giving them? And at the same time, you need to ensure that deliverables are met and targets, stay on course.
Right. I go back to my overall point of trust, right? You have to trust, whether it's a millennial or anybody else, you've just got to trust people to deliver based on the outputs or outcomes you're expecting, rather than the hours they're working, or rather than, they might be doing other things, etc. And that's why I think that constant conversation or staying in touch more deliberately is so important. Like my chief of staff is a millennial. I know she has 2 little kids, so I knew she was overwhelmed with all the childcare, school closure responsibilities, etc., that she is dealing with. But in one of my chats recently, I figured she's also building a house, not buying a house, she's building a house. And I'm like, oh my God. So I have stopped calling her randomly. I now do my every Monday call with her and just leave her alone completely. Right. So I think it is very individual rather than anything else. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
No, I was just going to say that, Neha, to your question about, I'm talking about 2019, I think sometime in 2019, I was in this meeting in Paris with, a set of managers, or we actually have a training center in Paris. And there was somebody, there was our head of corporate social responsibility was talking about flexible work. And someone sitting next to me said, on my dead body, am I going to let a 27-year-old or a 25-year-old work flexible, like, over my dead body? It's not going to happen. And now when the pandemic forced it, we could see that these 25-year-olds, the IT industry, especially in India, our workforce configuration is largely of the millennials, right? And even the Gen Zs. But you can see that they delivered seamlessly. Despite this whole apprehension about that they would take the whole system for a ride, they were irresponsible, they were going to really, cut corners, they're going to slack out, not show up. I think they did a phenomenal job. Most of our client satisfaction ratings, as well as, team satisfaction ratings, have actually gone up during the, remote work situation. So they proved us, if you like, right? They proved us wrong, that they could be trusted with remote work. So I think, Shanali, it's a mindset that we have, and it is about trust, like Dimple said. It's a give and take. They are, they like to work at their own time, and they like to feel involved in the decision making, right? I think these are the two things. If they have those, they're good. Also, the learning has to be immersive rather than instructional. You give them an immersive learning experience, and they're going to get things much faster. So perhaps we also, as organizations, need to change the way we, the way we either give out work to them or the way we expect them to learn.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Our next question is from Neha Jagtiani. Hi, Neha.
Hi, thank you so much. I think all the insights you've shared have been really useful. My question is an open one to the panel. How, according to you, can organizations really integrate their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy with their overall business and organizational strategy? And from your experience, have you seen any organizations do this well?
Should I go first to give you a breather, Priyanka? So I'll talk from my experience, particularly of the last year, only because in the UK, the whole Black Lives Matter movement was huge, right? After the killing of George Floyd, we experienced, if you like, a major movement in the UK for sure. Whilst we have a diversity strategy, which includes gender, social mobility, disability, ethnicity, we hadn't particularly focused on our Black colleagues in a very targeted way, and that brought it to the fore. So I think two things to answer your question. One is, I certainly use that moment, if you like, as a big catalyst to ride the wave, because the whole organization sat up and participated in what we call listening sessions, where our Black colleagues in that example were sharing their experiences, which are absolutely horrific, right? Even in this day and age. So I think there was this wave of empathy. There was this wave of, especially the younger people, saying, can't believe this happens even today. So we rode that wave, if you like, to ensure that the whole organization got engaged through various initiatives, and I can talk through those. But to your point on how to embed it in business strategy, there's enough and more research out there that tells you whether it's innovation, whether it's employee engagement, whether it's performance of organizations is multifold if you have a more diverse workforce, right? And unfortunately, some leadership teams, especially men, because they are actually the majority of leaders today, especially in FTSE 100 companies over here. You have to use sometimes that data to make them understand that this is not just the right thing to do. This is a business imperative. It is good for business, right? But I think post this whole George Floyd and Black Lives Matter movement, most people actually believe that this is the right thing to do. We have to represent society in our workplaces, and we actually don't, right? Whether it's from a gender perspective, we are still making incremental progress, I think, on gender. From an ethnicity perspective, it is still far behind. From a disability perspective, it's so shambolic that, you know, we as society have such a long way to go. So I think it's a combination of making leaders absolutely accountable. This is not HR's job, right? HR can come up with a strategy, come up with initiatives, and help embed it in the organization. But I think very importantly, D&I is about day-to-day behaviors. It's about the culture of the organization. So you have to almost create a movement of people. So people don't think, oh, I've signed up as an ally for LGBT, and therefore, you know, I've done my bit. So I think we've used this opportunity to say being an ally means speaking up, lending your voice. I got a lot of pushback from some people, I would say a very small number of people, saying, I never joined an organization to fight for social justice. I'm sorry, organizations have to play a huge role in creating the society that we want to. I think that realization you have to kind of ride on. Right? And you will always have people who pay lip service and don't really mean it and will not change. You have to just assume that. But actually, people want to be seen to be doing the right things. So it's a combination of the genuineness of it and people really feeling for it and wanting to do it. But then others who will do it because they want to be seen to be doing it. But there is no question that you will run a much better business from a performance perspective. And that research and data is absolutely available if some people need convincing, if you like, that it needs to be embedded in the business. Sorry, very passionate about that. I have to say, for the last 9 months, I would say since June, I've been in what we've called our Black Action Plan, and at least 10 other global organizations have just borrowed it, copied it, and we are like, just use it, you know, because microaggressions, etc., are just, it's amazing how rampant it is at the workplace even today. It's very sad, but I think if we all put our weight behind it, we can create a much better world, actually.
Thank you so much.
So I think Preeti has a question for Priyanka. Preeti, would you like to ask your question?
Actually, I think Dimple just answered it.
Sure.
So we can move on. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Preeti. So I think the next question is from Yumna.
Hi. So it is to anybody who wants to pick the question up, but it really is off the back of Priyanka mentioning the gig economy. With so many women who I think would like an opportunity to use their skills, because particularly in India, where so many have dropped out, you know, in the past, even before COVID, because of family pressures, etc. This becomes an opportunity for them to re-engage. And how would you recommend that they do this? You know, because is it via virtual sites like Maven, which, you know, try and provide technical opportunities? Is it via recruiting organizations, or would you say you just apply directly to organizations you're interested in working for, essentially saying I'm available as a gig worker?
Okay, I'll take that, Yumna. I think it's a combination of these, you know. You have to kind of stay active in these social forums, let's say, you know, where recruiters are scouting for talent. I think you need to have a LinkedIn presence. You need to have a presence on some of these, you know, gig work sites, right? You can register yourself there, and you can be, you know, visible there and say that, you know, your body of experience is so and so, and you're available. I think, you know, while it's still early days, it is a trend that is catching up very strongly. I can say that we have internally put a blueprint together to launch a gig work you know, initiative in India, and it's being put through an initial pilot, right, where, you know, things like concern around data privacy, etc., is being addressed. Because when you give out packets of work, those become a bit of a concern. So I think there is no convincing required on the concept of, is gig work here to stay? I think more of it is around how do we gear up our systems, IT systems and our processes, and go through legal to say that, all right, we need to have certain checks and balances. We are at that stage. But clearly I see it coming, Yamuna, and the point is, let's just be visible, let it be known on networking sites, on your to recruiters who reach out to you, that you would be open for short-term assignments. I see this happening much more easily in places like the UK, etc., where our colleagues work 2 or 3 days a week. I mean, in India, that concept is yet to come. I see it started, but it would be great, I think, for women's involvement in the workforce if we could really scale it up, over the next couple of years, where you have options to contribute 2 days a week, 3 days a week, do it at your own time. We definitely need to get there.
Thanks, Yamuna. So I will quickly thank you, Dimple and Priyanka, for taking on the questions. I would quickly like to invite Ishita to announce the next ELSA Connect session.
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry I'm out, so I have my mask on. I'm just removed it. So I'm very, very excited. Next week, I should be having a chat with a very distinguished co-ELSA and Bollywood actress also. And her name is Deepika Deshpande. She started with theatre, and then she now works with the Bollywood films as well as theatre. So please do join us for an afternoon of some filmy chat next Saturday. That is the 30th of January. Thank you. Bye.
This is Yoshni. And Ishita, I'm so looking forward to Deepika's session. And I am here to announce another very special session with Roopsi Jain. Those of us who know Roopsi know she's an incredibly talented artist, but very few are aware of a variety of other skills she possesses, from professional dance to jewelry designing. So please join us on Tuesday, the 26th at 4 p.m. to know Roopsi better as she shares her journey with us. See you there, and over to Jaya now.
Thank you, Ishita. Thank you, Nalini. I think we look forward to seeing more of you and all of you here today for the ELSA Connect sessions that are upcoming. I'd like to thank Priyanka and Dimple for making time today, being available, and for sharing their perspectives. I think all of us had a lot of fun in this session, and a lot of great pointers came out. I'd also like to thank Smriti and Ruchi. They're not on the call today. They had a personal emergency, but they really helped us put this session together and make sure we structure it in a way that adds value to everybody. And thank you to the ELSA Connect team for doing this every week so brilliantly. So thank you to all of you. Tanya, unless there are any comments and questions on YouTube, maybe we could close the YouTube session.